What is it like to die? No one knows for sure, but we can get a good idea by studying near-death experiences. We took a sample of 787 cases from the International Association of Near-Death Studies. They're located at www.iands.org. We looked at 787 cases. Most were from the 1960s to 2001, mostly from the United States, but reports came from all over the world. More women and more whites than expected responded, and people in the younger age groups were more likely to respond. It's a self-selecting sample of people who sent in their reports. Some editing and coding had to be required to tabulate the results. The association is usually referred to as IANDS, I-A-N-D-S, so we'll do that from now on. They collected the data through their webpage, www.iands.org, by letters and phone calls. The survey that they use consists of two parts. The first part is a series of questions, yes/no questions, category questions, check boxes, and the second part is the narrative, where respondents described in detail what happened to them. This current survey refers only to the category and yes/no questions. The narrative section of the survey has not yet been tabulated. So what did we find? We find, first of all, that there are a number of very common elements to the near-death experiences. The most common is an out-of-body. A person sees the world as if they are seeing things from a perspective outside their body. They can look down at the accident scene or the hospital bed and see themselves from outside, and yet they retain their consciousness. The second most common element is a bright light. Light can be off in the distance, and this is sometimes referred to as a tunnel. The light appears to be getting closer. And there's also a feeling of warmth or love. This leads to the third most common element, strong emotional tone. And the tone is usually one of love, acceptance, peace. A person feels embraced by the light, like they're totally loved, and everything seems to be okay. This occurs at a time, for example, with a traffic accident. Suddenly the pain is gone, and they feel at peace, even though they know that they've left their body. The fourth element is what we call knowledge. The person seems to suddenly realize what their purpose in life was, what they're here for, why bad things happen to good people. They have an understanding of all the mechanics of the universe. All their physics and spiritual questions seem answered. The next most common thing is to see a spiritual being. The spiritual being is usually giving them a greeting. It can be a being of light, a historical religious figure such as Jesus or Muhammad, and the person speaks to them and guides them. And by the way, the most common thing that the spirit being says, very common phrase in near-death experience, is, "It's not your time, you must go back." The sixth most common element in a near-death experience is blackness. The person sees nothing. It's totally dark. This often occurs as the first element in their experience. So the percentages then are as follows. The out-of-body experience occurs for 69.7%, the light or tunnel 66.4%, strong emotional tone 62.7%, knowledge and insight 54.0%, unearthly beings 49.5%, and darkness 35%. Although darkness occurs often as the first thing, if a person reports just one of these, it's usually the out-of-body experience. If they report two, it's the out-of-body experience and light. 3, out-of-body, light, and emotional tone, etc., usually in that sequence. We also have a number of elements that occur for less than a third of respondents. The first of these we call events out of keeping with your beliefs at the time. Admittedly, this is a kind of catch-all phrase because a number of odd, unusual, bizarre perceptions occur during the near-death experience. One example is flowers. Flowers are very common. A garden is very common. And when people focus on a flower, they'll notice that the flower not only has an aroma and appearance, but it might have a musical tone associated with it also. Or different buds on the same flower plant have similar musical tones, but are slightly different. Or different flowers altogether would have different musical tones, different aromas. The flowers themselves might even have a consciousness that the person can meld with. These are very unusual things. Another example is the type of communication. It's usually telepathic, or it's combined with other senses like light and sound and aroma, vibration. Thoughts all seem to be molded into one perception, as opposed to separate sense organs that we have here on Earth. For example, one report of a man talking with an angel, and the report indicates that as the angel spoke, orbs of light came out of his mouth, rolled towards him, and as the orbs of light touched him, he could receive the telepathic communication. So very unusual things. The next common thing is a landscape or city. This is often referred to as, usually, like I said, there's a garden, but sometimes there are structures. There's a library is very common. There's a crystal city or a city made out of gold, El Dorado. Again, a very common element is seeing deceased loved ones, relatives, people that have died before you, friends. And another less common element is a void. This is different from the darkness. There's no sensation whatsoever. So it's dark, but also there's no feeling, there's no perception, there's no light. It's often called the void. Another big thing is a boundary. The boundary can be a cliff or a river that you can't cross. This brings to mind the river Styx through our mythology. It could be a bridge or a canyon that they cannot cross, a cliff, some kind of barrier like a gate, or even the pearly gates. Another common thing is the life review. It occurs only for 22% of respondents. One particular case, for example, is a person will see their life as a blue line, and the spirit guides that are with them can zoom into the blue line, and that blue line is their life, and depending on where they intersect the blue line, they'll see different scenes of their life. The life review is very emotional. It seems to occur very quickly in a flash, yet every detail of their life is reviewed, and people are not judged, but they do judge themselves when they see these scenes, but the spirit beings usually do not give judgments there. Another kind of element is a vision of the future. People will see that their children are going to get married in the future, or political events are going to occur, or if they continue what they're doing, they'll go down this certain path. So these less common elements, let's look at the percentages. The out of keeping with beliefs occurs for 29%. Seeing a landscape or city, 26.9% report that. Seeing deceased loved ones or relatives, 26.1%. Experiencing a void or nothingness is 25.1%. Seeing a boundary, 24.2%. Life review, 22.2%. And a vision of the future, 19.9%.